Telling the story of Giovanni Brusca is like telling the story of a piece of Italy that was, still is, and probably will remain one of the most controversial events ever. In this story, there are all the twists and turns, almost always without a happy ending, relating to the fight against the mafia. But not only. Several questions remain unanswered, and some others have very complicated answers. For those who don't know Giovanni Brusca, it would be sufficient to say he was one of the most brutal and ruthless, as well as prolific and efficient killers of the Sicilian Mafia, under the direct orders of Salvatore Riina. Brusca was the man that materially pressed the button for the bomb that killed the most important anti-mafia judge in Italy, Giovanni Falcone, together with his wife and the bodyguards. It makes it all the more interesting, then, to know that Giovanni Brusca is now almost a free man. Ironically, on the one hand, the release of Giovanni Brusca is the result of a law specifically demanded by Giovanni Falcone, the sister of the judge killed by Brusca. But there is much more to the story of Brusca, because this tells a story of how the mafia and its bosses are a mix of violence and strategy. But let's start at the beginning. Giovanni Brusca was born into a family that was already mafia to its core. His father, Bernardo, is himself one of the bosses of the Sicilian Mafia in San Giuseppe Jato. Now, this little town is one of the suburbs that make up the outskirts of Palermo. Bernardo Brusca is a loyal ally of the Corleonesi, led by Toto Riina, and the partnership between the Brusca family and Corleonesi remains solid, following the rise to power of Salvatore Riina. It's not surprising that when Giovanni Brusca was officially initiated into the Sicilian Mafia, Salvatore Riina attended the ceremony in person. The first murder carried out by Brusca took place in 1976 on the orders of Riina himself. Now, as we mentioned, Brusca was a highly specialised killer. He did not have any other significant role inside the Mafia. However, he wasn't just a simple killer. He was the best and the most efficient murderer the Mafia ever had, according to many mafiosi. He himself declared himself to have killed more than 150 people, and that's without considering how many people he was ordered to kill by other Sicilian Mafia affiliates. In the eyes of ordinary people, having a very prolific killer may sound like a terrific asset and an arguably essential machine to keep in your arsenal as a powerful crime organisation. Wrong. The Mafia, and in general big criminal organisations, actually don't work like this. And the reason is clear. On a general basis, a boss doesn't want an affiliate to be so knowledgeable about the criminal organisation. It's always better to spread facts and responsibilities between several members, as obviously if anyone is caught by the police, it'll be harder for one individual to piece together the whole story. However, all Mafia bosses considered Giovanni Brusca as a genuinely safe option when it related to murders. They knew that he would get the job done, and done well. And consequently, they relied on his services pretty heavily. Already in the first years of his active career within the family of San Giuseppe Jato, Giovanni Brusca stands out for his macabre specialisation. The men Brusca killed were prominent actors of other families, especially during the Mafia War, or government personnel deployed to fight the Mafia on the ground. And amongst the latter, at the age of 20, Brusca took part in the killing of the Carabinieri Colonel Giuseppe Russo. And again, a few years later, he took part in preparing the car bomb that would have killed the anti-mafia judge Rocco Chinichi. Despite being only an ordinary member of the San Giuseppe Jato family, during the time of his father, Bernardo remained the boss, the intensity of Brusca's activities as a killer continued unabated. In 1984, following important revelations of Tommaso Buscetta, by far the most important mafia informant, Brusca was arrested and placed under investigation. Within a few months, his father Bernardo was also arrested. And as a result, for the first time, the clan of San Giuseppe Jato was no longer run by a member of the Brusca family. Temporarily, Baldassare Di Maggio, called Balduccio, was entrusted to run and carry on the San Giuseppe Jato family. And despite Giovanni Brusca remaining in the shadows by virtue of being in prison, he was still able to provide direction to his family without having a direct and constant presence, although running the business was unsurprisingly a little bit more difficult. It should also be noted that DiMaggio had his own power and ambitions that didn't always coincide with those of Giovanni Brusca. The turning point came only in 1991, when Giovanni Brusca suddenly became untraceable and became a fugitive. Following this decision, Brusca decided also to take back, by force, the San Giuseppe Jato family and establish himself as the only boss of the clan. Balduccio DiMaggio, suddenly dethroned and without any authority, realised he was in danger and decided to escape from Sicily. However, without mafia protection and with a pending death sentence by Brusca and Riina, DiMaggio was arrested immediately, and he soon decided to become a collaborator for justice. DiMaggio's revelations would also be one of the keys which led to the eventual arrest of Toto Riina. Brusca's rise as one of the leading bosses of the Sicilian Mafia was unstoppable, but didn't interrupt the series of murders for which he is directly or indirectly responsible. 1992 is a year where Brusca stands out for three truly terrible and bloody events. First, he killed the rival boss Vincenzo Milazzo, and then had his pregnant wife killed. Then Brusca, as we mentioned before, made himself directly responsible for the murder of Giovanni Falcone, materially pressing the button of the detonator connected to the explosive which massacred the most preeminent anti-mafia judge, together with 4 others. And finally, Brusca took an active part in eliminating Ignazio Salvo, a powerful businessman connected to the Sicilian Mafia and a connection between the mafia and politics. 3 extremely big murders carried out with incredible precision and, of course, with brutal ferocity. However, the most shocking aspect is that those murders, if possible, are not the most brutal actions of Giovanni Brusca. In fact, following the murders of Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino, and the consequent reaction of the police force against Sicilian Mafia, the bosses resorted to terrorism, placing bombs in major cities targeting civilians. And obviously, Brusca was one of the active members in this macabre plot. Another shocking murder committed by Brusca was the killing of a 12-year-old boy. In 1996, Brusca strangled and then dissolved in acid Giuseppe Di Matteo as revenge against Santino Di Matteo, a mafioso who had begun to collaborate with the justice system. Now, this horrific killing runs counter to many of the known principles of the mafia, specifically not harming innocent people. But many of those principles, as you know by now, are perhaps more respected in movies and fiction than in reality. A few months later, Giovanni Brusca was arrested following the revelations of other turncoats. After his arrest, Brusca himself decided to become a turncoat, and so benefiting from the witness protection program. However, according to the judges, the first revelations of Brusca were incorrect and imprecise. In addition, all the information provided had the intent of damaging the interests of other families rather than bringing new facts and information for the ongoing investigations. Only after a couple of years did Giovanni Brusca decide to provide valuable information to the investigators, which then led to important discoveries. However, and even today, several judges have the impression that Giovanni Brusca didn't really reveal everything he knew, particularly about his personal assets. Even in 2015, several assets confiscated by the police were considered attributable to him. In addition, 190,000 euros found in his wife's house were returned to him because the charge of fictitious registration of assets had, unfortunately for the police, fallen outside of criminality under the statute of limitations. In spite of this uncertain and shaky relationship with the magistrates, in 2000, Giovanni Brusca was enrolled in the Informant Protection Programme. The deal was simple: collaboration in exchange for not remaining in prison for the rest of his life, as happened, for example, to Salvatore Riina and Bernardo Provenzano, who never talked and died in jail. Instead of the life sentence, Brusca was sentenced to 30 years in jail. After 25 years, in 2021, Giovanni Brusca has been released on probation and almost set free. So today, at 64 years old, Giovanni Brusca is free, even though he'll be on parole for the next 4 years. And this has been possible thanks to the effects of the law on turncoats expressly requested by Giovanni Falcone. And as Falcone's sister points out, this is undoubtedly a tragic intersection which doesn't detract from the importance of the law on turncoats. This law has made it possible to break that wall of silence that surrounds the mafia. And at the same time, it's possible, if not probable, that many assets acquired during his mafia activity are still actually in his possession. And this is a problem that remains difficult to solve. So there you have it, a fascinating story. And please, as always, do let us have your opinions about this. We do read and we do love your comments. And as you've probably noticed, we do listen and indeed act on your suggestions. So thanks for listening, and until the next video, we'll see you soon.